I scream, you scream, we all scream for Museum of Ice Cream. There's no denying the universal power ice cream holds over all of us. I mean, think about how many experiences in your life have been perfectly accentuated with a frozen concoction of goodness. In today's episode, we get to chat with the CMO of Museum of Ice Cream, where she shares her and her team's secrets to inspiring imagination and connection to help unlock the kid in all of us. Well, first off, I want to know about this art piece behind you. I feel like it has a story. I feel like there's something there we need to learn about.
So one of my good friends, Andrea Foster, who was a peer of mine at Marcus Hotels downtown Milwaukee, when she was moving, I went through her apartment and she goes, pick out what you would like to purchase. And I said, can I have that? And she goes, no. I was like, well, you just told me I could pick out anything. I picked out that. And I said, it's so cool. And she's like, no, it was created by like a downtown artist in Milwaukee. It's very special. And I was like, okay. And then a little bit later, she showed up with the piece. She's like, here you go. And I have now, because I love it so much, it sits behind me every single day.
It's so fun. Wow. What a bait and switch in the best way. Like bait and switches usually go really negative, but this is the positive negative bait and switch that we didn't know we needed.
Really good taste. So I have a lot of stuff in my house where someone's like, where'd you get that? I was like, oh, my friend, she moved. So she gave it to me.
I love it. So tell me a little bit, what do you love about the painting? I mean, it's gorgeous. There's so much movement in it, so much color. What do you love about it?
Exactly, the color. I'm a big fan of the color of use. I'm a big fan of the abstract feeling of downtown Milwaukee. And I just think it pulls you in. Like, it just feels like something that it makes me joyful, but at the same time, you're like, it's just beautiful. Like, just the colors and the strokes, like, just a gorgeous piece.
I love it. Well, I mean, talk about colorful. Talk about emotive. You get to work with one of the most colorful, joyful brands that's out there right now. Like, let's tell folks, introduce yourself, tell folks who you are, and tell folks what you get to do for a living, which is so fun.
Well, I'm Erin Levzow. I'm the Chief Marketing and Commercial Officer for Museum of Ice Cream and Figure 8. Museum of Ice Cream is a place built to unite and inspire through imagination and connection. We do that by allowing you to rediscover the kid in you. It's for all ages. Kids know how to be kids, but adults get to rediscover that. And then we get to eat unlimited ice cream too, which isn't a bad thing. And we play. We just get to play. And kids can walk up to other kids and be like, hey, you want to play? But if I walked up to another adult and said that, they'd be like, whoa. But what if we could? What if we could go play together? Like, that's what's so beautiful about it. And every one of our museums, we have museums in Singapore, Austin, Chicago, New York. We're opening Miami and Boston this year, and a lot more growth coming in our pipeline. They all end with a giant sprinkle pool. They're all a little bit different. Every museum's a little bit different, but we want you to jump in. We want you to play. We want you to discover things together. And it's really about that human connection piece, which again, in our society, I think human connection is lost for people, or because we get caught up in our own stressors of life, being able to look at someone and be like, I see you. I see you. Like, let's play. Let's break down those barriers. Let's be a little bit vulnerable. And that's what's fun. And that's what brings me joy about what I get to do. And I'm very blessed to work for Museum of Ice Cream and Figure 8.
So much fun. I mean, that's how you and I first got connected, was just that we tend to be super playful folks, and we are those kids that are now on grown-up playgrounds who ask each other to be like, hey, you want to play? You want to have some fun? And that's, we just kind of passed each other's vibe check and started to embrace, connection like that. And what I find really interesting about the environment and the space that you're creating is that you're inviting folks to tap into that playfulness in their hearts and give them permission to do it, because they're not giving themselves permission to be playful in their day-to-day. It's
easy to walk through a space and just walk through. And we see a lot of adults come in and they're just like, oh, this is cool. And you're like, no, we're going to play. There was actually a study done by the National Theater Association talking about what age, and younger people being more active to want to get involved, right? They want to be involved in the play. They want to be able to be called on stage. And then as we get older, we're like, don't call on me. Don't, no, I'm just here to observe, because we're nervous. We're scared. We've built up, call it years of trauma, whatever it might be, but
Yeah.
we've built up these walls, and we're scared that if someone sees behind these walls and sees us for who we are, and that's really the core power of what we get to do. And someone said to me, but you just eat ice cream. And I was like, whoa, there's so
Wait
much
a
more
minute.
to it. I said, we play. I said, I have friends that will last a lifetime. And I remember before this job complaining to someone that finding friends as an adult is so difficult, right?
Yeah.
Finding people that you're like, hey, you want to hang out? And like, just life gets in the way. And I said, being an adult is like me being like, yeah, I want to hang out, but we never hang out, and making time for it. At museum, you make time for it and you break it down, and it's a memory. And when people create this memory, they want to capture the memory because it's so just, it's not even happiness, it's joy, which is transcends that.
Well, and to your point about folks, the stasis just being in this more reserved, I'd say risk averse mindset, like how do you work with your team to actually help them step outside of that stasis, like tap into their playfulness and then use that to curate and create experiences with your marketing efforts?
I think it really comes back to vulnerability, right? So I'm very vulnerable with my team. I actually was having this conversation with a CEO of a company the other day at a conference, and he was asking me questions about how I lead. And I told him, like, I'm vulnerable, I'm myself, I live out loud. And we were talking about it. And he goes, can I ask you a question? I said, of course. And he goes, has that ever hurt you? And I said, yeah. I said, being your authentic self, being vulnerable, absolutely has hurt me, right? Because there are people that don't want that. I said, but when you think about it, would I ever change anything? No, absolutely not. I would never change anything about being who I am and being my real self. I put good into the world. I believe good comes back to you. And that's how I work with my team is we put good out into the world together. I believe that we succeed and fail together, and failure is not a bad thing. I believe that not everything's going to work. And if we fall off the cliff, I'm going to be there to catch you. I'm not a leader that walks ahead of you. I'm a leader that walks behind. I'm going to cheer you on. I'm probably going to be I'm walking behind, let's be honest, because I'm the slowest one in the group, but also because I'm pushing them up the hill, right? Like if they start to falter, I also want to be there to catch them if they stumble. So that's my job as a leader, is truly to help motivate them. And the best way I know how to do that is by being vulnerable and being open and being honest and being focused on the business goals and the playfulness around it. Like I get to sell joy. Like my life doesn't suck.
Not at all. Well, I love that. And I think you hit on a theme that's come up in a couple of episodes actually of Connected Brand, which is that authenticity is difficult, and the vulnerability required to embrace your most authentic self. In a previous episode, we talked about your fundamental truths and embodying your fundamental truths as a form of you being authentic. And it's really scary and it's really hard because they're the most precious tenets to who you are and to your identity. And when they're not well received, it's hurtful. It does hurt to be your most authentic self.
Yes. And then you start to question yourself, and questioning yourself can be the worst thing. The worst thing. So it's a lot of therapy. It's a lot of therapy that gets you there, right? Like it's a lot of how do I stay true to myself? Like you said, the fundamental truths, your core values, and not start to mask up. And there are so many times where something happens or something said where you're like, whoop, mask went up. And you're like, no, that's not who I am. I have to break that down.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love that. I think it's a hard exercise to do because it's exhausting just to do the mechanics of your job day to day. And then to do the mechanics of your job really well requires that self-work. It requires that moment of intentionality that you're applying to the work that you're doing. And it's tough. It's not easy.
It's easy.
I one thing that struck me too when we were getting all this coordinated and stuff too was the intentionality of this brand is just it just reigns through and through, right? Like it's a
Mhm.
playful space. Each aspect of the experience that you're creating does entice this playfulness, but this is like the level of detail you apply to your intentionality is wild, including your email address. Like, what?
Yeah.
Tell me about the email addresses, and then also tell me about how the intentionality is also woven throughout
I mean,
your
it's
company.
throughout everything because we truly live and breathe it. And our founders, Mary Ellis Bunn and Manish Vora, when they created this, the design is very intentional. Everything we do and everything we think about in each space is created for a reason. And when you go in there, you might be like, what's that for? Everything has a purpose of how
Mm.
we engage and interact. Nothing is built to take a picture. It's all built to play and engage and create human connection. And yes, we do have ice cream names. So when I started, I'll be honest, I was like, oh, I have an ice cream name. Like, is anyone going to call me that? Not realizing like that's my name forever. Like, that's how people know me. My ice cream name is Swirls. So everybody at work calls me Swirls. That's
Oh my
my
gosh.
email. No one calls like people. What's great about it, if salespeople try and email Erin, they're like, it didn't go through. No, you have to know my ice cream name to get to me.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
the only other time it's hard is when you're in like a partner meeting and you haven't explained that to them. And I might say like, hey, Sprinkles, we're going to do this. And they're like, what just happened? I'm like, oh, we have ice cream names.
Do you get to choose your ice cream names?
So we do. You put like a list together and you check it for like, you don't want there to be like two cookies and cream or anything.
Totally. Yeah,
Um,
that would be super
and
awkward.
so we check everything. And for me, swirls, I competitively ballroom dance, so it's like twirls, and so it just kind of fit.
I love that. Also, it's so fun. Like, for those that are listening on this podcast, the painting that's behind you is also full of colorful swirls, and it just happens that all of the parts of their swirls create the skyline of Milwaukee. You said, but it's very much who you are, and it's perfect. It's perfect. I'd be remiss if I didn't just like stop for a hot second and talk about ballroom dancing, which is another really emotive and playful, honestly. It can come across as formal to those that are to the untrained eye, like mine. But in talking with you, it's a really playful thing to get involved with. Talk to me about your ballroom dancing.
So I started over 3 years ago, and now my whole family actually ballroom dances. My kids all ballroom dance, and people think of ballroom dance as like Beauty and the Beast, like the waltz, and it's
Yeah.
we waltz, tango, foxtrot, cha cha, rumba, swing, hustle, push pull, salsa, everything. We do solos. So like right now, I'm working on a showcase to the Chicago song "When You're Good to Mama," and I dance with a professional dancer who's the world champion. So I'm very blessed. And when you ballroom dance, I actually wrote an article about like the parallels to leadership because you have to be vulnerable. The hardest part for me to learn was to learn to follow and not to lead. And it
Mm.
turns out my partner doesn't like when I lead, he prefers when I follow. Um, and to allow yourself to not think about anything else, but to focus on everything your body has to do to move, shoulders back, head up, where are my feet going? And like it's easy to overanalyze, but the best time I dance is when I practice, but then let it all go and go,
Yeah.
all right, let's go. And it's so much fun. And the first time, there's a drop called the death drop, where it literally drops me to the ground and my head's this far from the ground. The amount of trust I have to have in someone else to go, but also control myself. I have to control what I can control
Mm.
and then trust that the process will work. It all parallels so nicely. So it's taught me so
Mm.
much. It also, if we want to talk about being vulnerable, whew, man, getting on that dance floor and putting it all out there, I feel like I would much rather go give a speech to someone than they go, why are you nervous? You go in front of crowds of people. I'm like, this is different. And it does. It makes you
Yeah.
nervous and vulnerable and you truly are putting it all out there. So I keep going because it fills me with joy. It fills me with happiness. And I know it's pushing me to be something bigger.
Yeah. It's amazing. I love, like, it's so clear in talking with you that your passion, you're just radiating now talking about it. And it's so fun to get to experience and see that. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people can tell. Like, you can just dance and you can do the moves, right? Like, I mean, the most coordinated I'll get is like the cha-cha slide. Let's be honest here. But like the death drop or all of the foxtrot, all the incredible things that you'll do in dance, people can tell when you're just going through the motions
Yeah.
and when you're feeling this in your heart and in your soul. And I think that therein lies one of the most important pieces of building a brand, for a personal brand, but also a brand like Museum of Ice Cream that is so connected. You have to feel it in every fiber and believe it in every fiber of your being. Otherwise, folks are just going to watch you go through the motions, and it's not going to capture any imagination or playfulness or attention from your
I
audiences.
actually think you just hit it on the head. And that's why we've seen so many experientials kind of show up and then disappear. And why we've sustained, like we were the first and we've sustained all the way through for
Mm.
that reason. We live and breathe it. Like it is part of our core. Our founders are still very involved. And that to me tells it like we have a purpose. We have a bigger purpose than ourselves. And it truly is to drive joy. And so someone asked me the other day, they were like, what do you do? And I don't know why it caught me off guard because I was like, what do I do? And I went, I put good into the world. And they went, what? I meant like for a job. I was like, oh, I do that for my job too. I put good into the world. And that's what we get to do. And so when I think about it that way, it's not really a job.
I love that reframing, right? Like, we don't have titles, we have purposes, we have missions that we're here to accomplish.
And I
And
don't
we
know
just
why
so happen to do it.
it
Yeah. Oh,
strikes
sorry, go
you
ahead.
odd. Like it strikes you odd when someone's like, what do you do? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Well, the insinuation of that question is like judgment, right? Like,
Yeah.
what do you do? And the way that we receive that question is like, well, is my title going to be big enough? Is the impact of my work
Yeah.
going to be big enough? Like, is the logo I work for going to be big enough? But it's not about the trappings of this. It's about the impact that you're making with the title. That's incredible. Well, you mentioned with your co-founders, they are very heavily involved, but I have to imagine, especially with all the locations you have all over the world, new locations opening on the horizon, which, by the way, my wife and I live just an hour south of Boston. We are so excited to be able to experience it firsthand. But what is the reinforcing infrastructure, or what is the architecture of your company such that it has to be self-sustaining? Because if your CEOs are traveling all over the world, if you are traveling all over the world, things can very quickly fall to the wayside. How do you build the infrastructure to build a regenerative culture like that?
That's a great question. So when you're a startup, right? The startup is like your founder and like two people, right? Like not just us, any startup. They go, "Oh, we're grassroots. We do everything." And when you go from startup to growth mode, and everybody hears me say, "We're a startup in growth mode." You have to start building processes and infrastructure for that so that you can sustain because that's not repeatable. Like a startup isn't repeatable if the infrastructure isn't there. And so part of the reason they brought me in, we brought in a chief people officer, a chief financial officer, because we know that we have to build all the processes around that. And what got us here won't get us there. And so you can't continue to open locations. You can't even diversify your types of locations without that infrastructure, without processes that can be picked up and implemented. And I think of it like I have a long history in franchise space and multi-unit experience. And it's the same thing. Like when you have two restaurants, no big deal. You can handle two restaurants. All of a sudden you have 500 restaurants. You're like, what's the process? How do I handle all these people? What do we do? And it's processes and infrastructure to continue to build. But what's important about it is that you don't lose, I call it the red thread, but you don't lose what you started and why you started. And I think that's the important part of having the founders involved is you're not losing where you came from, but you know that you have to adapt and change and flex in order to get where you need to go.
I love that. Well, I think in this practice of, so we look at life form structures, right? We all have this fundamental life form structure of DNA, which is the shape of a double helix, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the shape of a double helix is that you're swirling sorry, I didn't mean to call you swirled. It's swirling upwards, but you're traveling in a circular motion such that you are finding the same patterns. You're just taking a higher perspective or vantage point on that double helix structure. And your culture, that red thread that you talked about, which is, I love that line, is that cyclical pattern. And as you grow and as you scale and as you get higher, you have to make sure that you're staying true to those values, to the things that you keep coming back to time and time again. They're just growing and expanding, and you're seeing them from a higher perspective each time you come around your cycles of growth.
You also just made a really good point about like how I'm thinking about all the stories of executives that as they've grown have lost themselves. And they have to like, it's back to your roots, right? It's that same idea of like, how do you grow and continue? And I go back to lots of therapy, but it's like, how do I make sure that as I continue my process, as I continue to grow in my career, as well as the people around me, that I don't lose sight of who I am and why I do it.
It's so simply said, right? But it's so hard to reinforce because you're being pulled in so many different directions all at any given time. And that fragmentation does erode. I think of like, a glass when it shatters, the edges over time start to erode. They start to become much softer, and it's really hard to know exactly how the whole thing stuck together in the first place. So,
and I am blessed that at this company, we embrace the whole self. And so one of our founders, Manish, when I first started, and he'll laugh when he hears this, but when I first started, he goes, do we want to start our meeting with some meditation? And I was like, no, we don't. And he goes, no, we do. And he's like, all right. He turned on like a meditation, and we start doing it. And I'm like, is this what we do here? Like my first week, I was like, okay. All right. And now I'm like, guys, we need to start with some breath work. How are we starting this meeting? And as people come in, it's so much fun to see because it does change how you embrace the meeting. And I just had never done it before, but it opened my eyes. But he accepts the fact that this has been a transition for me. But we allow each other to be our whole selves when we're in that room.
I love that. Well, I love that he gave you permission to try it, and you gave yourself permission to try it. I imagine too, there's a space within your culture where it's like, this doesn't serve me. This practice isn't what's best for me, but you also give folks the space to try the things that do serve really well for them. I will say meditation and breath work is a thing we share in common with our company. We do spend a lot of time thinking more about the whole self in our business, because, as I mentioned, the fragmented version of yourself is just not going to perform to the best of your ability.
Isn't that what societal companies are built on, though, the fragmented version? And like, I think if we can shift companies to look at the whole person, it changes the way our workforce culture is. Because when I first started in workforce, it was leave your bullshit at the door, right? Leave it at the door, come in, you're doing a job, and then you can go home and deal with it. And I've never believed in that concept. I believe in whatever happened in your home life, whatever happened outside of these four walls affects how you perform inside these four walls. And so the only way is to share and talk. And not everyone's like me, but I believe that if I care for the human, I don't just care for the human that's performing the function. I care for the whole human and everything about their life, what's going on with them. And it also allows you to better understand and connect with them. So that's the only other reason I don't believe in work-life balance, because I don't think it's a balance. I think everything's a blend. It's part of my life. When we say balance, it makes it sound like work is over here and everything else is out here. And I do not believe that's a thing.
Yeah, I love that. I also hold a very similar belief that it's not about work-life balance. It's not a conditional Boolean logic of or, right? It's an and statement here. And it's about harmonizing all the pieces, right? Like sometimes one specific type of harmony can take the forefront as the melody. Correct. And then take a back seat. And then the other, element can also come forward. And so it is about harmonizing it all. It's not about one or the other, just balancing at all.
Completely.
This has been such a rejuvenating conversation to hear someone who it's clear you're passionate about building something. And I'd say we could put a name to it too. There's been a lot of research around this practice of psychological safety,
Mm-hmm.
and the role that vulnerability and leadership plays in helping to reinforce and build a culture of psychological safety, and that ability to take those risks in an
Yeah,
environment where you're embraced for all facets of yourself. It's a really important part of building a connected brand, and the connection to the self is the most important place that any leader who's aspiring to build a connected brand or is keeping a connected brand alive is. That's the place you got to start. That's the place you got to keep coming back to.
exactly. Yeah, I read Culture Code,
Oh
and it
yeah.
talks a lot about psychological safety and how there's multiple components to it. But one of is, do you feel like there's a future? So making sure that when you speak, you're talking about future statements, right? Making sure that people feel like they can be their whole selves. It's just a very fascinating thing because when you break it down, it's so simple.
Mm.
And you might think, well, of course, someone, and oftentimes I talk to executives and they go, of course they know they have a job, or of course they know they're safe. And I'm like, but do they? Like, have you given them all the cues to tell them that this will continue, that their ideas are warranted, and if they fail, that's okay?
You just blew my mind because we're in this process right now. I forgot about that part in the book that talks about the future, right? Like what lies ahead. And we're in this phase right now where macroeconomic conditions are causing constriction on specific industries, and the tech industry, where Lupin Tai is within,
Yeah.
is seeing a lot of constriction. And we're seeing a lot of folks under this undue stress right now at the fear of losing their job because they're not getting the
Feels
reinforcement
like it's going to end.
internally and
Feels like it's
externally.
going to end, right?
Yeah. And so that constriction is causing additional constriction on their ability to produce the magic, the playfulness,
Yeah.
all the things that make for exceptional brands.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, so cool. Well, I could spend hours just chatting and talking about all the cool stuff that you're doing, but I would love to learn about some of the things that you're most excited for on the horizon with Museum of Ice Cream, or campaigns that you're working on, things that you're really inspired by right now with your team.
Oh man. So we just came out of this Pink Miss campaign. Pink Miss is like our holiday campaign. But one of the things we did was, it was called the Sweet Gift. So anyone who came in November and December, each booking received a ticket to gift to someone. And it was about this pay it forward of like, you just got to experience the magic. Now gift it to someone else to experience the magic. And we saw that people were so excited. They're like, what is this? And we're like, it's a free ticket. And they couldn't believe it. They're like, is it a discount? No, it's a free ticket. It blew their mind. Right now, we're in our connectedness campaign and how we connect with others. And connectedness could mean anything. We'll be talking a lot about sprinkle kindness. We talk a lot about that. And sometimes sprinkle kindness, people think about outward.
Mm.
Sometimes the hardest person to be nice to is yourself. And I find that a lot, which is, how are you kind to yourself the same way that you're kind to others? And so how that comes to life. We also have, and then other promotions, we have, we're working with Cardi B's Whip Shots, which is an alcoholic whipped cream, which, to be honest, I never thought alcohol and whipped cream mixed. I was wrong. And of course, Cardi B is behind that. So we've had fun launching that, working with influencers. We just launched last month, working with Ida in Chicago, who's a local North Lawndale ice cream artisan, working with Kellanova Pop Tarts, a Pop Tart ice cream, which, I mean, who didn't think to put this together? It was phenomenal. So did a lot of work with that. So just a lot of different partnerships on our horizon. We're very blessed.
Mm.
And then obviously with the new locations going into Miami, like every time I think of that, I think of that Will Smith song. And I'm like, we're going to Miami. Let's go.
Bienvenido a Miami.
Every time someone says Miami, I'm like, bienvenidos. They're like, Erin, calm down. But it's going to be fun. And the amount that we get to bring and joy to an area like Miami, we did have a pop-up there originally. And that pop-up kept getting extended because we saw how much need there was for it. And so now we're able to build a permanent location. And that's all we build now is permanent locations.
So fantastic. I mean, talk about law of attraction. All the things that you just listed are things because folks want to work with you and partner with you and help amplify the joy that you're bringing out into the world and the playfulness. Like it's fun to work with folks who do fun, cool, interesting, innovative, and intentional things. So it's no wonder you're seeing such an abundance of incredible projects that you and your team get to work on.
Yeah, we're, like I said, very blessed. And I do believe there's a gentleman, his name's Ted Rubin, and he runs a company called Return on Relationship. And it's really about relationships, right? Human connection. So, of course, I'm like, I love that. But he handed me a button one day, like a year ago, and the button just said, be good to people. And I was like, this is like what I live by. I put it on, and everywhere I went, people would stop and go, I love your button. And I was like, why is this crazy? Why is this crazy that
Right?
just saying be good to people are like, yep, yeah, that's what we need. And it like reminds people when they're in their craziness of their day to just
Mm,
stop and go, that's not what life's about, right?
mm.
Life's about just being good to people, putting good into the world and sharing your passion. And I think when we do that, like you said, law of attraction, people naturally come to us and go, hey, we want to do that too. And so we're, like I said, very blessed that they're attracted to us and we're able to go, yeah, let's build something cool together.
Yeah. It's the gravitational pull, right?
Mhm.
That really folks don't realize how easy it is to build, but how overcomplicated they make it in order to try to build a followership or get the kind of partnerships and
Yeah,
sponsorships that you're working on. But yeah, and not to undermine any of the hard work that went into your team activating all these really cool opportunities for yourselves. But, you know, folks could have very easily said no if they felt like it wasn't aligned with this fundamental principle of be
correct.
kind to people and spread joy out
It
and into the
always
world.
starts at the core. I mean, when
Mm.
we launched, we also have a principle, which is anything is possible. And um, we built 60-foot sprinkle pools all over the world last year, including next to Hudson Yards and the Vessel. And someone was like, how did you do that? And we're like, we asked. Like, we knocked on doors and we're like, hey, can we build this? We're going to bring a 60-foot sprinkle pool. Are you guys okay with that? And they were like, okay. Like, and we had a 3-hour line waiting of people during National Ice Cream Day to play in sprinkles for 5 minutes and eat ice cream. And just to be clear, I won't wait in line for much, but it was unbelievable because they wanted to have part of that experience.
That's so fun. I mean, it's fun. How can you say no to fun? You could build a sprinkle pool here in my yard, and I would be honored to be a vessel of fun in our tiny little square acre of lot. Oh man, how it's that kind of stuff that I think folks underestimate. I mean, there's probably folks listening to this right now who are saying, I work for a really boring, stale company. Like nobody's excited. We can't take. It's not ice cream. It's not as
Yeah.
fun as ice cream. How do you help them get over that mental blocker and help them access some fun?
I think, well, one, I'm in marketing. So I do believe if you're a good marketer, you can market anything. I've always had fun in every career I've done. Before this, I was at Jack in the Box and Del Taco. And to
Mm.
be fair, I thought tacos were the happiest thing you could possibly sell. I was wrong. But
They had their sweet counterpart to their savory awesomeness.
it was truly joy. When I spent 10 years working in Vegas, someone was like, oh, you sell hotel rooms. I was like, no, I sell an escape from reality. I sell the ability to lose your inhibitions. Like, isn't that the most joyful thing? And so,
Yeah.
like, each part of my career was like that. And so when I went to Wingstop and someone was like, oh, you sell chicken, that must be hard. And I was like, no. I said, I sell a crave. I sell, like when you eat chicken wings, our whole tagline was get at it. Get at it
Mhm.
because you're messy. Your arms are on the table. You're going to have it on your face. It's something you connect with others because you're all eating them together. Like you can't eat it with a fork and a knife. It's about getting at life and getting after life. And I was like, this is amazing. So again, been unbelievably blessed to work at all these concepts where someone goes, oh, that must be boring. It's not boring. I don't care if you're like, It's kind of like bringing technology. If you work for a computer company, you're allowing someone into a whole nother world by selling them a computer. It becomes about what your ethos is and really has nothing to do with the actual product you sell. The product is what gets you there. It's about what does this do to the human heart? And when you can connect to the emotional heartstrings of whatever that crave is, the easiest one is car insurance, right? Car insurance, they sell on fear. Fear is the easiest thing to sell on.
Mm-hmm.
And the number one thing you can sell on, which is you need this or this will happen, right? If you don't have this, this will happen. Now you're selling on fear. I get to sell on passion and crave and joy. It's a whole different experience.
Totally. And there is a way to shift something, that fear-based positioning, into, potential-based positioning, and lifestyle-based positioning, which I think is really fun. We have a similar ethos within our company that it actually has very little to do with the gift. The gift itself is actually not the end-all be-all. The gift is just a conduit for the connection you're building with the humans that you get to work alongside or build cool things alongside. So I just, that's such a great philosophy to have.
So nothing's boring. I can't think of one product that would be boring to sell that doesn't have a story that connects to a heart somehow.
I agree. Well, if folks want to go experience the playfulness, the playground that is Museum of Ice Cream, how do they find a location that's nearest to them?
You just go to museumoficecream.com. You can buy tickets right online for any of our locations. We welcome you. We're open most days of the week. We're open lots of different hours. So there's always a time slot that you can fit into. We have an entire cocktail bar for purchase as well. And I will tell you, our cocktails are unbelievable and they're all experiential. And I've never been able to use as much edible glitter in my life as I've been able to in the museum.
Not even in Vegas?
Not even. I don't even know if it existed when I worked in Vegas. But now the ability to just spread edible glitter is like truly spreading joy. So come visit us. You can find me on every social media platform in the world, I feel like. So if you're looking to stalk me, I'm sure you'll get in touch.
Absolutely. And if they want to watch your ballroom dancing, YouTube,
you can find it. Yeah. On my Instagram, there's a lot of videos of dancing between myself and my kids. And then my kids and I started a TikTok, and it started as them being like, Mom, you have to learn all these dances. And I was like, I can't do it. But now I know the Barbie dance. So I'm in.
Oh my gosh. My wife is going to be in your DMs there on TikTok because she has been practicing the Barbie dance since last summer. So like she's just, that song just hypes her up so much.
I love that. We did the Adams. What was it, the Wednesday dance? Like
the Wednesday dance.
They even like, they were like, Mom, we have to dress all in black for the Wednesday dance. And I was like, all right, let me go change. But like, this is the type of things my kids and I do together. And so like, to me, again, it goes back to being my authentic self. I was talking to someone and they said, you don't want to put all that as an executive on social media. I was like, yeah, I do. Like that goes back to the core of who I am. Like you have a lens into my life.
I mean, it comes full circle to what we were talking about as well, too, right? At the very beginning, where that vulnerability, you're going to have some haters because it's not going to be for everyone, or they're not going to understand your approach.
Someone told me, you've made it when you start to have haters. And I was like, oh, I must have made it.
I made it. Congrats.
I have some haters.
Well, it was so fun being playful with you, getting curious with you, and learning more about all the wonderful things that you do in and out of work. I can't wait to go watch a couple of your TikTok videos with your kids now as well.
Thank you so much for having me.